The pen snapped. Kong Jae-won stared at the two broken halves in his hand, ink bleeding slowly across the signature line of a $55 million merger document, and did not move for 4 full seconds. He had not broken a pen since he was 12 years old. The sound that caused it came again from behind the East Wing wall. Low, warm, completely unguarded. Not the careful, practiced laughter that people produce at corporate dinners when they want to seem relatable. This was real laughter, the kind that escapes without warning, the kind a person cannot plan or control. He set the broken pen down on his desk, beside the ruined document, beside the cold cup of barley tea he had forgotten 3 hours ago. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Gangnam glittered 43 floors below, a city he had spent 15 years building himself into the kind of man who could overlook it from exactly this height. He had earned that view. He had earned every square meter of this penthouse, including the East Wing he had not once entered in 37 days. 37 days. He had counted them, not because counting mattered. It was simply what his mind did. It cataloged. It tracked deviations from expected patterns. And for 37 days, the expected pattern had been silence. Parallel lives. 2 wings. 1 shared kitchen neither of them used. And walls thick enough that he had believed, truly believed, that he would never hear anything from her side. Until tonight, a voice responded to her laughter from somewhere deeper in the East Wing. Male. French. Unhurried. The voice of a man utterly comfortable in the space he occupied. The words were indistinct through the wall, but the tone was unmistakable, intimate, easy, the tone of someone who had been talking to this woman for a very long time. Jae-won's jaw tightened. He was not jealous. He reminded himself of this with precision. He was a man who assessed risk, cataloged anomalies, and identified variables that disrupted a system. This was simply a variable, a deviation from the expected model. He reached for a new pen, then stopped, then looked at his hand, then placed the pen back down carefully. For the first time in 37 days, for the first time in longer than he would admit, Kang Jae-won had no idea what to do next. 5 months earlier, he had been a man with a plan for everything. Hong Kong International Airport, Gate 34. He had 40 minutes to catch a connection to Seoul that he was about to miss because a Singapore merger had run 6 hours over schedule and his buffer time had evaporated. He stood at the gate counter and spoke to the agent in clean, standard Mandarin. The agent responded in rapid Cantonese-inflected Mandarin that kept dissolving at the edges into something his Beijing-trained ear could not fully catch. "Can you repeat that?" he said. She repeated it. He still could not parse it. He asked again. He watched the agent's face cycle politely through the effort of not sighing at him. Kang Jae-won, who spoke 4 languages and had closed deals on 3 continents, stood at a gate counter in Hong Kong International and felt, for a humiliating, unfamiliar moment, completely helpless. Then a voice beside him spoke. She's saying the system shows 3 available seats, but the gate upgrade list will push 2 of them if you wait 4 minutes. She's recommending you take the confirmed economy seat now rather than gamble. The voice was a woman's. She addressed the gate agent in perfect standard Mandarin and then, without pausing, shifted into the local dialect the way you shift into the rhythm of a place you know well. Not translating, not performing, just speaking. The agent's shoulders visibly relaxed. In 90 seconds, a confirmed boarding pass was in his hand. He turned to say something. "Thank you." Anything. The woman was already walking away. Small carry-on rolling behind her, a tablet in one hand, reading a document as she moved through the crowded terminal. She navigated the space the way certain people navigate complicated situations, like the space had already agreed to accommodate her before she arrived in it. She had not looked at him once. "Wait," he started. She rounded a corner and was gone. He stood at the gate, holding his boarding pass with the particular feeling of a man who has just failed to ask a question he did not know he needed to ask. He boarded his flight. He closed 3 deals in the following weeks. He told himself it didn't matter that he never learned her name. He was wrong about that. 3 weeks later, standing at the altar of a ceremony hall in Hanamdong, Kang Jae-won looked up and went completely still. She was standing across from him in something simple and ivory. Holding a small bouquet, she kept adjusting with one thumb. She was not nervous. She was waiting, with the same quiet, precise attention she had given the gate agent at gate 34, watching him with the same assessment. Calm, unhurried, entirely unimpressed. He processed this in approximately 4 seconds. The woman from the airport was his wife. He had agreed to this arrangement, introduced by his mother, approved by his board's legal team, both of whom had determined it was strategically aligned, without once looking at a photograph of the actual person. He had reviewed the legal structure, the financial compatibility, the logistical terms. He had signed where indicated. Standing here now, watching her be completely indifferent to the fact that he had just recognized her, he understood with absolute clarity that he had made a significant error in calculation. From the guest rows, barely audible, he just realized she's a real person. A pause. This is going to take a while. He kept his eyes on her. She met his gaze. She did not smile. She did not look away. She simply waited, patient, composed, already several moves ahead of him in a game he hadn't known had started. Her name was Naomi Blake. He learned this from the marriage certificate, which he read the following morning with the same thoroughness he gave every legal document. Born in Kingston, Jamaica, raised in London from age 7, degrees from the London School of Economics and Seoul National University, Korean law and cross-jurisdictional trade policy. She spoke English, Korean, Mandarin, French, and a language he identified from a single overheard phone call in the first week as Patwa, the way she laughed through it with her grandmother, rapid and warm, like music played at full volume. She moved into the East Wing on the second day of their marriage with the efficiency of someone who had already measured the space and planned the layout before she arrived. By the end of day 3, it was a fully operational workspace. Dual monitors, floor-length bookshelves, a standing desk angled toward the Han River. She had brought her own coffee machine, her own router, and her own houseplant, which she watered every morning at exactly 6:15. On day 4, she left a printed note on the kitchen island. 14 bullet points. Preferred kitchen hours: 6 to 7 a.m. and 9 to 10:30 p.m. Grocery preferences organized by category with brand specifics. 1 footnote: she did not require conversation before 8 a.m. and would not be providing any. He sat with it for a moment. Then he wrote a response. Equally organized, equally thorough. He left it on the island before she woke the next morning. She wrote a counter-response by noon. He replied to the counter-response. She replied to his reply. By the end of the first week, they had produced what was functionally a cohabitation legal brief. 6 pages organized into subsections covering kitchen use, visitor protocols, shared spaces, noise levels, and the specific circumstances under which either party was permitted to contact the other directly rather than in writing. Not once in the production of this entire document had they spoken to each other directly. Ms. Oh Jiyoung arrived Thursday morning to deliver files and found both of them gone and the printed notes spread across 3/4 of the kitchen island. She read every page slowly, with the steady expression of someone who has decided not to have a reaction in a professional space. Then she photographed the notes with her phone and opened a new document, Marriage Thought Index. Day 8, -10 degrees. They have invented household diplomacy. 14 bullet points and 1 footnote. This is somehow worse and better than anything I expected. She tucked her phone away, left the files, said nothing. This was, by every metric J1 applied to it, the ideal arrangement. Clean, efficient, no friction, no emotional unpredictability, no complications that could destabilize either of their professional lives. He had designed the penthouse specifically for this, the separate wings, the soundproof walls, the shared spaces built for passing through rather than remaining in. A home optimized for 2 people who needed to live near each other without actually living together. He had considered this a feature, which was why the laughter from the East Wing was not merely an anomaly. It was a breach. He ordered a communications trace on the East Wing's network activity the morning after he heard it. He told himself this was standard security protocol for residents at his level of exposure. He was aware, somewhere beneath the analytical surface of himself, that this was not the complete truth. Full trace on all encrypted communications from the East Wing network, he told Ms. O. Last 60 days. Cross-reference any acquisition targets currently in play. A beat of silence on her end. The East Wing, sir. Yes. Another beat. He could hear with perfect clarity the question she was choosing not to ask. Understood, she said. The trace came back in 48 hours. Ms. O placed the report on his desk and stood beside it without sitting down, which was how he knew the contents were significant. He read the first page. The second, he set the report down the way you set something down when your hands need to be completely still. The East Wing network showed regular encrypted communications with one Lucien Moreau, CEO of Soleil Pacific Group, a Paris-based conglomerate that J1's acquisition team had been trying to close a deal with for 8 months. The $55 million acquisition that was currently stalled over a single territorial clause. The deal that had consumed 200 hours of his legal team's time and showed no sign of resolution. The most important deal on his board's agenda. His wife was in regular, disciplined, strategic contact with the man on the other side of it. J1 sat with this information for exactly 60 seconds. Then, get me everything on Lucien Moreau. Current deal status. All communications from our legal side. Everything from the beginning. Ms. O did not write in the index until she was back at her own desk. Then she typed, +3 degrees. He's paying attention now. He just doesn't know yet what he's really paying attention to. The annual KJ Capital Acquisition Dinner was not on Naomi's schedule. J1 knew this because he had reviewed her calendar, not entirely officially, and her Thursday evening was blocked for a call with a client in Brussels, which was why, when he walked into the private dining room on the 38th floor and saw her already there, standing with 3 executives who were all unconsciously angled toward her, he stopped moving for a half-second before continuing to his seat. She was wearing midnight blue. No jewelry except small gold studs. She was talking, precise, unhurried, completely at ease, and the 3 executives were listening with the focused attention of men who had just realized they were the least interesting people in their own conversation. Director Yoon Chong-soo materialized at J1's elbow. Late 40s. Acquisitions director. The man who had been running the Soleil deal for 8 months. Is that your wife? He said with the tone of a man who believed spouses belonged in a different category of building entirely. Why is she here? I'll let her explain that to you, J1 said. Yoon crossed the room and said to Naomi, with the smooth confidence of a man who had never once been corrected in public, I wasn't aware tonight was open to spouses. Naomi turned from the executives she had been speaking with. She looked at Yoon with the calm, assessing look of someone identifying exactly what kind of problem they're dealing with. I wasn't aware attendance required a Y chromosome, she said pleasantly. We're both surprised. One of the executives made a sound that was almost a laugh and immediately turned it into a cough. The dinner began. For the first 40 minutes, it was exactly what these dinners always were, positioning, careful language. Everyone saying the thing they wanted the other side to record rather than the thing they actually meant. J1 watched Naomi from across the table. She ate. She listened. She said very little. He noticed she was tracking everything. Every deflection, every qualified statement, every moment where language was being used to avoid rather than communicate. Then Yoon presented the Soleil acquisition framework and the territorial clause that had been blocking the deal for 4 months. The core issue is the exclusivity provision in Article 12, he said, with the authority of someone who had been paid to have this opinion. Their side won't move on commercial exclusivity within the Korean market for 3 years. We cannot accept that. It's a non-starter. Naomi set down her fork. Which version of Article 12 are you reading? The table went quiet. Yoon turned to her with the particular expression of a man deciding whether to be patient or dismissive. The standard version, he said. There isn't a standard version, Naomi said. There's the 2019 framework version and the revised version under the 2021 EU-Korea FTA supplementary protocol. They read completely differently. The 2021 revision reclassifies the territorial exclusivity provision from commercial to communicative strategy, which means the 3-year restriction applies to brand communication channels, not commercial operations. You've been negotiating against the wrong clause. The silence at the table became a different kind of silence. That can't be right, Yoon said. Our legal team has reviewed this. Your legal team reviewed the base framework without the supplementary protocol because the protocol wasn't published in the Commercial Law Digest until March of last year, and most domestic practices missed the update, Naomi said. She said it without heat, without superiority. Factually, the way you say a thing that is simply true. What you've been treating as a hard commercial barrier is a communication strategy provision. There's room to negotiate. Approximately $8 million worth of room, by my read. The room was very still. Yoon opened his mouth, then closed it. Jae-won, who had not moved since she started speaking, said 2 words, "She's right." He did not frame it as a compliment. He did not say it with surprise. He said it the way he stated any fact that had been verified, directly without qualification. He looked across the table at Naomi. She did not smile. She did not look relieved. She looked at him with the same quiet assessment she had given him at the altar at the gate in Hong Kong, like she was adding this data point to a file she had already been building for months. The dinner continued. Yoon said very little for the rest of it. In the car on the way home, they sat in the back seat with 2 feet of leather between them and 5 weeks of printed notes behind them. The city moved past the windows. Neither of them spoke. Naomi looked out at the Han River Bridge. She was thinking about what he had said and the way he had said it. She had spent 10 years in rooms where men either underestimated her on sight or overcorrected the moment she proved them wrong, rushing to bury the original dismissal under excessive praise, as if volume of approval could erase the original absence of it. He had said 2 words, in the tone he used for verified data. No surprise, no performance, no apology, just she's right. She had been seen, not applauded, not corrected, not managed, just accurately measured. She looked out at the river and noted, with the precision she applied to everything, that something had shifted inside her, something adjacent to warmth. She folded the feeling carefully and set it somewhere she did not yet have a name for. Across the 2 feet of leather, Jae-won stared at the road ahead and thought about the way she had not looked at him when she corrected Yoon. How she had simply spoken the true thing without checking how it would land. He had met hundreds of people in his professional life who performed competence. He had met very few who simply inhabited it. He thought about the airport, the gate agent, her retreating figure. He thought, I have been watching this woman wrong. The kitchen light was on at 2:47 a.m. Jae-won had not expected this. He had come out of his office, where he had been reviewing the Soleil acquisition files for the 3rd time since the dinner, because his body had finally registered that he had not eaten in 9 hours. He had planned to be in and out of the kitchen in 4 minutes. He had not planned for the kitchen light to already be on. Naomi was at the island with a document spread open in front of her, a pen tucked behind one ear, a glass of water untouched to her right. She was in a gray, oversized sweater and reading glasses he had never seen her wear before. She looked up when he came in. They looked at each other. I thought you had a Brussels call, he said. It ended at 1, she said. She looked back at her document. The burner on the right is the one that works. The left front one runs cold. He looked at the stove. He had been staring at the left front burner for the past 40 seconds. The one he had turned on, watching it glow faintly with what he had believed was sufficient heat, but was clearly and embarrassingly not. He moved to the right burner without comment, with the composure of a man pretending this had always been the plan. "I knew that," he said. She did not respond. She turned a page. He opened a cabinet. Found ramen. Read the instructions with more attention than they warranted. He was aware of how loud every action felt in a quiet room. He was also aware, in the specific way that you are aware of a sound that has stopped, that he was thinking about nothing except the 2 feet between them. "The water needs to boil first," she said. He looked at the pot. The water was not boiling. It was not close to boiling. He had added the noodles while the water was still cold. "I knew that too," he said. She looked up from her document, not smiling exactly, but the corner of her mouth had moved in a direction. "Sure," she said, and looked back down. He took the noodles out, started over. He was aware of how absurd this was. A man who had run a billion-dollar company for 6 years, standing in his own kitchen at 2:47 in the morning, embarrassed about a pot of water in front of a woman who had not looked at him for more than 4 seconds. He put a second bowl on the counter without deciding to. His hands did it. He noticed afterward that he had done it and chose not to examine it too closely. She came off her stool, washed her hands at the sink, and sat at the island again. He put the finished ramen in front of her. She picked up her chopsticks and ate without commenting on the fact that there had been a second bowl. He sat across from her and did the same. They ate in silence for a while. The kind of silence that is different from the 37 days of silence that had preceded it. Not 2 people avoiding each other, but 2 people choosing the same room. "The territorial clause," he said eventually. "Not asking. Just saying it the way you think out loud when someone is present." "What about it?" she said. "The $8 million of room you described. Is it clean? Or does it create exposure somewhere else in the framework?" She was quiet for a moment, working through it. "It creates exposure in the indemnity provision of Article 9 if you don't amend the scope language simultaneously. The 2 clauses are tethered. Most people miss it because they're in separate sections." "Show me," he said. She set down her chopsticks, pulled her document across the island toward him, put her finger on a paragraph and started talking. They talked about the clause, then about the amendment, then about the indemnity provision and the 3 ways it could be read depending on the applicable jurisdiction. She drew a diagram on the back of her document. He photographed it with his phone. She corrected something in the diagram. He corrected her correction. She read his correction and nodded once. The closest either of them had come to giving each other a compliment all night. At some point, she refilled both their water glasses. He noticed and did not comment. At some point, he made 2 cups of tea. She accepted hers without looking up. When he finally checked his phone, it said 4:58 a.m. She was still at the island, one hand in her hair, cross-referencing 2 documents side by side. The East Wing had a sophisticated and complete home office. She had been working in the kitchen instead. He did not ask about it. "The indemnity amendment," he said. "Could it be structured as a rider rather than a revision to the main body?" She looked up. Her eyes, behind the reading glasses, were alert and considering. "Yes," she said slowly. "Actually, yes. That's cleaner. It isolates the exposure without disturbing the clause architecture." She looked at him for a moment with something that might have been reassessment. "That's good," she said. He picked up his bowl, carried it to the sink, rinsed it. She was still watching him when he turned off the kitchen light on his way out. In the dark hallway, he allowed himself, briefly, privately, to recognize that this was the first night in a very long time that he had not wanted a room to be empty. Ms. O arrived at 8 the next morning with files and found both rinsed bowls in the dish rack, side by side. She looked at them for 11 full seconds. Then she updated the index. +8 degrees. The bowls. There were 2 of them, in the rack, together. "I need a moment to collect myself. This is a professional environment, and I need a moment." She delivered the files. She left without saying anything. In the elevator going down, she may have smiled. She would deny this if asked. 3 days later, the first full joint session between KJ Capital and Soleil Pacific was scheduled at the KJ Capital boardroom on the 32nd floor. Lucien Moreau was not what J1 had expected. He had prepared for a competitor, guarded, strategic, reading the room for leverage the way everyone in these rooms read for leverage. What he got was a silver-haired Frenchman in his late 50s who walked in like a man arriving at a restaurant he had been to many times, scanned the room until he found Naomi, and greeted her in French with the warmth of someone genuinely glad to see a person they genuinely liked. "Naomi," Lucien said, kissing both her cheeks, "you look appallingly well-rested for someone running 2 negotiations simultaneously." "I sleep excellently when I know the other side's legal framework better than they do," she said. Lucien laughed, a real laugh like hers. Then he turned to J1, read him in approximately 3 seconds, extended his hand, and said, "You have extraordinary taste in business partners." He said it with a glance at Naomi that made clear beyond any doubt that he was not speaking only about the deal. "I'm aware," J1 said. Naomi opened her laptop. "Can we look at the clause document?" she said. The session ran 3 hours. J1 watched Naomi work and thought, not for the first time, that watching her negotiate was like watching someone play chess in a room full of people playing checkers. She did not fight the territorial clause. She recontextualized it, shifted the frame of the entire conversation until both sides were looking at the same document and seeing different, more useful things. She knew what Lucien could not afford to lose. She knew what J1 would not surrender. She was moving both of them toward an overlap neither of them had found in 8 months of trying. During the break, J1 found himself standing beside her at the floor-to-ceiling window. "You knew who I was," he said. "In Hong Kong. You had a KJ Capital boarding pass in your jacket pocket," she said, not looking at him. "I was going to be living in your home in 3 weeks. You helped me anyway." "I help people navigate systems they don't understand," she said. "It's what I do." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, a Han River ferry moved slowly against the current. "Did you help me because I was going to be your husband?" he asked. "Or despite it?" She turned to look at him then, for a long moment. "I helped you because you needed it," she said. "The rest of it was separate." "Is it still separate?" he said. She looked at him for one more second. Then she turned back to the window. She did not answer. She did not walk away. In the space where her answer should have been, something warm and unresolved remained between them, in the air, neither of them reaching for it and neither of them moving away from it. He spent the rest of the session watching her restructure a $55 million deal and thought, "I have been studying the wrong data." 2 weeks later, Lucien Moreau knocked on the door of the penthouse. J1 answered it. He knew the visit was scheduled. He had checked Naomi's calendar, not entirely officially, and seen the dinner blocked. But knowing and being prepared turned out to be different things. Lucien stood in the doorway in a charcoal coat, a bottle of Burgundy in one hand, and read J1 in approximately 3 seconds with the ease of a man who had been reading rooms for 30 years. "Good evening," Lucien said. "Come in," J1 said, with the composed hospitality of a man who had absolutely not just discovered this dinner was happening when he heard the knock. Lucien stepped inside. He moved through the entrance hall slowly, taking in the 2 wings, the untouched kitchen, the printed notes still on the refrigerator door. They're so long now that nobody noticed them anymore. He picked up the edge of one. "Read it." Set it down gently. "Beautiful home," he said. "Very spacious." "Naomi chose the layout," J1 said. "She always builds in exit routes," Lucien said pleasantly, "even when she intends to stay." The dinner happened. 3 people at a beautifully set table, the conversation professionally immaculate and personally revealing in ways none of them named directly. The food was catered. J1 had arranged it in 40 minutes that afternoon. He did not mention this. Midway through the main course, Lucien set down his glass. "I want to tell you something about the first time I worked with Naomi," he said. He said it to the table generally, which meant he was saying it to J1. "It was Tokyo, 2018, a bilateral clause interpretation in front of a joint review panel. She was 26. I had 25 years of experience and absolute confidence in my reading of the provision. He smiled. She corrected me, in front of the panel, in Japanese, which she spoke better than 3 of the Japanese lawyers in the room. I was so embarrassed I laughed. That was the moment I understood I had met someone I needed to stop underestimating and start learning from. J1 looked at Naomi. She was looking at her wine glass. There was something in her expression he had not seen before. Not the composed, precise Naomi of boardrooms and 2:47 a.m. kitchens, but something quieter, something that looked, briefly, like the feeling of being seen without having to perform the being seen. "How long have you worked together?" J1 asked. 6 years, Lucien said. She has never once made the same point twice. If she has to say something more than once, she considers it your problem to fix, not hers to repeat. J1 looked at his own glass. He thought about the printed notes, the 6 pages of careful, organized language they had produced to replace a conversation neither of them had known how to start. He thought, all of that was a system. The system was my design. She worked within it because I built the walls and she moved in after they were already standing. After dinner, after Lucien left, Naomi found him in the hallway. "The press have picked up a rumor," she said without preamble. "Conflict of interest. CEO's wife negotiating for the opposing side. The story will run in 2 days if someone feeds it." "Let them," he said. "It will destabilize both sides of the deal. Investor anxiety on the Soleil board is already elevated. If we appear divided," she paused, "I need to move into the master suite for the negotiation week. Public appearances, shared optics. 1 week." "How long have you been planning this?" he asked. "Which part?" "Any of it." She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, something had softened at the edge of her voice. "The deal since before we married. The marriage," she paused again. "The marriage was its own variable." "Am I a variable?" he said. "You were," she said quietly. "I'm not certain what you are now." He moved to the couch in the master suite that night without being asked. At some point before dawn, he woke and found a blanket folded on the armrest above him. He had not put it there. He lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling for a long time without cataloging anything. In the morning, he said nothing. When Ms. O arrived at 8 with documents, she stopped in the doorway of the main room, looked at the folded blanket on the couch, and quietly reached for her phone. Plus 15 degrees. The blanket. "I am taking a 5-minute walk. This is a professional environment, and I am going to take a 5-minute walk." The full board session ran all day. Both acquisition teams, both legal sides, both principals, arranged around the longest conference table in the KJ Capitol building, with Naomi at the whiteboard and 200 hours of stalled legal work spread before them. She dismantled the territorial clause framework point by point and rebuilt it in real time into something that served both sides. By the 3rd hour, several members of J1's legal team were taking notes from her rather than consulting their own briefs. Director Yoon interrupted twice. The second time, she turned from the whiteboard and looked at him with the specific patience of a person who has decided to be very calm about something she could just as easily be furious about. "Director Yoon," she said, "I understand you've been working on this deal for 8 months and that it's important to you. I want it closed too. I'd like to get back to the framework, unless you have a substantive concern about Article 9. He had no substantive concern about Article 9. He sat back. During the break, Lucien found J1 at the coffee station. "She told me once," Lucien said, pouring his own cup, "that the secret to negotiation is knowing what the other party cannot afford to lose. Not what they won't give up, what they genuinely cannot survive losing." He looked at J1. "She's been doing that with you since Hong Kong." "What do you mean?" J1 said. "The airport," Lucien said. "She knew who you were. She also knew you needed help you hadn't asked for. She gave it without making you ask. She doesn't do that for everyone. only for the ones she's decided are worth the real version of her. He paused. She makes you want to be a better person. I don't know if you've noticed yet. He had noticed. He simply hadn't let himself examine it until someone else said it out loud. That night they worked late. He came to his desk to review the amended clause framework. She was already there, reading glasses on, 2 documents open side by side, a second cup of tea steaming beside the first one she had forgotten. She looked up when he came in. He sat across from her without asking whether he could. For a while they worked in parallel silence, the comfortable kind, the kind that had started in the kitchen at 4:58 a.m. and had been building, without announcement, ever since. I heard you laugh, he said. He was looking at his document. In the East Wing, 37 days in. She was quiet. It was a Tuesday, he said. 9:43 in the evening. You were on a call. I know, she said. I heard you go quiet on the other side. The walls aren't as thick as I thought, he said. No, she said. They're not. A long silence. He looked back down. I ordered a communications trace the next morning, he said. I told myself it was security protocol. I know that too, she said. You knew, he said, looking up. I left the French calls on the less secured channel deliberately, she said, without any particular expression. The real negotiations were always in Korean. I wanted to see what you'd do when you found something you couldn't explain. That is, he started. Strategic, she said. I was going to say something else. I know what you were going to say, she said, meeting his eyes. You could have asked me. At any point in 37 days, you could have knocked on the East Wing door and asked who I was talking to and what I was working on. He had no answer for this because it was completely true. I didn't build those walls to keep you out, he said quietly. I want you to understand that. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her expression shifted, not breaking exactly, yielding, like a door opening just enough to let air through. I know, she said softly. You built them to keep yourself in. He held very still. She turned back to her document. She did not move away. Their hands were close enough on the desk that when he reached to clarify a clause she was wrestling with, the edge of his knuckle brushed hers. Neither of them moved. He fixed the language. She read it. She nodded once. She typed it. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of everything neither of them had the right word for yet. Then his phone lit up on the desk between them. He read the alert once. He set the phone down, and his whole expression closed. What? She said. He turned the phone to face her. The headline read, KJ Capital CEO's wife secretly negotiating for rival firm. Conflict of interest or coordinated intelligence operation. He read it once. That was enough. Go to bed, he said. J1. I'll handle it, he said quietly without heat, in the tone he used when something had been decided and the only remaining question was execution. Please, go to bed. She searched his face for a moment. Then she gathered her documents and went. He made 4 phone calls in the next 2 hours. The first was to his head of security. The second was to his legal team. The third was to his media liaison. The fourth was to Ms. O. I need the source, he said. By morning. Ms. O had it by 6 a.m. Director Bae Sung-jin, KJ Capital Acquisitions Division. Positioned to benefit significantly if the Soleil deal collapsed and a competing acquisition took its place. The article had been carefully constructed, the journalist carefully selected, the timing precise. J1 called Bae Sung-jin into his office at 7:30 a.m. He placed the evidence on the desk between them. He did not raise his voice. He did not perform anger or disappointment. He simply said, Your resignation effective immediately. Security will walk you out. Bae began to speak. There is nothing to say, J1 told him. You've said what you needed to say already. In print. You're done. He left. Then J1 called his personal legal team and executed a formal transfer of 15% of his personal KJ capital holdings into Naomi's name, granting her voting rights across all primary subsidiaries. He did not call her first. He did not ask her preferences. He had thought about it for exactly as long as it took to understand that she should have had it from the beginning, and then he had done it. The press retraction came within 4 hours. Not because the journalist had a change of heart, because the legal architecture of what J1 had just done made the original story structurally false. She was not a liability hidden inside his empire. She was a co-architect of it, on paper, in law, in every jurisdiction that mattered. Naomi saw the transfer notification on her phone at 9:10. She was in the green room outside the boardroom, waiting for the final session. She looked at the number. Then again. She set the phone face down on the table, pressed her hands flat against the surface and breathed. Then she walked into the boardroom and closed the Soleil Pacific acquisition in 43 minutes. It was the cleanest close of her career. Lucien signed without objection. J1's board signed without objection. The territorial clause was amended, the indemnity rider attached, the framework restructured exactly as she had drawn it on the back of a document at 3 a.m. in a shared kitchen with a man who had made the wrong bowl of ramen and turned on the wrong burner, and somehow, in being wrong about those small things, had started to become exactly right about her. When the last signature was in place, there was a moment of quiet in the room. The specific quiet of a thing that has been impossible for a long time suddenly becoming done. Extraordinary, Lucien said simply. She was already closing her laptop. J1 was outside the boardroom when she walked out, hands in his pockets, positioned against the opposite wall, as close to casual as he ever managed. She stopped in front of him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. "The transfer changes the power structure of everything." "I know that too." "Why?" she said. "Because you should have had it from the beginning," he said. "Every room you walked into these past 8 months, you were the most capable person in it, and you walked in without the structural backing to match what you were actually doing. That's on me. I had the mechanism to fix it, and I didn't fix it until someone forced my hand." He looked at her. "I don't want to be the kind of man who waits to be forced." He took her to a room on the west side of the building, east-facing windows, afternoon light flooding in warm and gold. He had renovated it in the past 2 weeks. Her name was on the door, not a nameplate, engraved, permanent, the kind of thing you commission when you are not planning for someone to leave. She stood in the doorway and looked at it without speaking. He knelt, not the way men kneel in proposals, with rehearsed words and something in a box. He knelt the way a man kneels when he is done with performance, entirely. He had nothing in his hands. His voice was completely steady. "I want to rewrite the arrangement," he said. "Equal decisions, equal resources. I want to be in the same room as you by choice. Not because the logistics put us there, not because optics require it, not because we've produced a legal brief that permits it. By choice. Every day. I want to stop cataloging the silence between us and start filling it with something worth keeping." "J1," she said. Her voice was quiet. "You built soundproof walls in your own home." "I know. You designed a life specifically to avoid exactly this." "I know that too." "So what changed?" she said. "You laughed," he said, looking up at her. "On a Tuesday, 9:43 in the evening. And I stood on the other side of a wall I had built myself and felt, for the first time, what it costs to be on the wrong side of it." He held her gaze. "I'm asking you to help me take it down." She reached for him, not slowly, not with hesitation, with the same directness she brought to everything, the same unguarded quality as her laughter that first night. She kissed him the way you kiss someone when you have stopped protecting yourself from them. Real, warm, without performance. When she pulled back, her hands were on his face. "The French conversations were a decoy," she said. "I routed them through the unsecured, channeled deliberately, and let you find them." "You knew I'd run a trace," he said. "I knew you'd investigate rather than ask," she said. "You always investigate. I needed to see what you would do with something you couldn't solve by analysis alone, whether you would close or lean in." "You designed this," he said. I designed the test, she said. I didn't design you passing it. That was yours. The airport was the beginning of my assessment. I'd reviewed your acquisition profile for 3 weeks before we were introduced. I knew your gait, your flight, your schedule. When I saw you at gate 34, I wanted to see how you handled being helpless. And how did I do? He said. You didn't pretend, she said. You asked 3 times, and then you stood there and let it be hard. Most men with your profile would have escalated to a manager by the second ask. She looked at him steadily. I thought, this one might be worth the real version of me. He stood up slowly, and he said, she smiled, not the polished smile of boardrooms and corridors, but the real one, the one that reached everything. And she said, you are. The East Wing doors were open when they returned home that evening. She had been moving things gradually into shared spaces over the past week. The penthouse did not look different. It felt completely different, more inhabited, more real, like a space that had finally agreed to be lived in rather than managed. Ms. Oh Ji-young received the share transfer filing notification at 9 p.m. She opened her phone, scrolled to the thaw index, looked at her last entry, plus 15 degrees the blanket, and typed the final one. Day 44, plus infinity. The East Wing doors are open. I'm deleting this app. I'm going home. I'm calling my mother. It was always going to be these two. From the very first Tuesday, 9:43 in the evening. She deleted the note. She did not stop smiling until she was on the subway, and then a little longer after that. If you felt every moment of this story, the silence, the bowls, the blanket, the walls coming down, drop the one word that hit you hardest in the comments right now. Just one word. We read every single one. And tell us, where are you watching this from? And what time is it there right now? Drop your location and time in the comments. We love knowing who is on the other side of the screen. And if you are watching this thinking about someone you've been on the wrong side of a wall with, someone you've been circling rather than reaching for, this story was for you specifically. Like this video if Naomi and Jae-won deserved each other from the very first scene. Subscribe if you want the next story because there are more of them, and they are coming. Built exactly like this one. Slowly, precisely, and with everything that matters said without saying it. New videos drop regularly. Turn on the bell so you never miss the next one.